Hello, guys. Yeah.
Hi, Chris.
Hey, welcome back.
Thank you.
Saw you guys like busy this weekend. I was busy too, but family stuff more than. Oh my God, we're still trying to put together this classroom for the kids. It's like still teaching from home. It's been a little bit stressful. Kids a little. Our youngest one a little freaked out. He's 6 years old, starting first grade, and it's like in the middle of this whole thing. Anyway, let me just share my screen here. Today's gonna be that day that we're gonna be talking about pores and wrinkles and all that stuff, which is kind of funny. Um, when I post my stuff on Instagram, a lot of people think that all I do is basically like just put pores. It's like cover the face with pores and the work is done, right? Basically, like everything is instantly realistic. And the pores and wrinkles and all this stuff are just like should be just like the cherry at the top, right? Like we shouldn't be covering our bad models with lots of fine detail because they simply don't work. It's like it's very easy to see when the model is a bad model. Like you just have to change the lighting a couple of times and then the model starts falling apart or start rotating. So the first thing obviously is going to be always like making sure that the primary forms are clean, that the things are in place. So it's like the best thing to do it, like to check your model is always like to zoom out, right? Like very far away and see your image, like your little model as a thumbnail basically. And even better than that is to do like a few renders just to check if things are in place, right? One thing that's very easy to do is to actually nail the likeness from the front. For example, you put some blueprints in there, it's like, and things just like work fine, and then the model looks a lot like the character and everything. And then as soon as it starts spinning, if things are not in place, things just start falling apart. And I would say like we're going to talk about this later, about like going back a little bit to the primary and the secondary forms. But a common mistake, it's kind of like the relationship between like the lower part of the face and the upper part of the face. So basically like right around like the middle of the nose and eyes, either they are like too forward or too backward. So basically like from the front, it looks great. And then as soon as it starts spinning, you're going to see that the eyes are sitting too deep into the socket, the eye socket, or they are like too forward, it's like, or the forehead is too receded or is too, it's like forward as well. So those relationships like between the upper and the lower part of the face are very common. It's like those, it's like it's almost like misaligned, right? So a lot of times, what happens when we are talking about the reviews, which we're gonna have this weekend, right? Like the next weekend on Saturday, we're gonna have the reviews. My students normally send me the files, either an OBJ or the ZTL, and then I start poking around. And the thing is, like when we are too focused on looking at our model for a long period of time, right? There's a combination of like getting tired, and then you don't see the things the way you used to see when, it's like when you first started the model. Everything started getting like the window gets narrower and narrower, right? Like it's harder and harder to see what's missing in the model. And sometimes you just need like a big refresh, and this big refresh can come from yourself. Like I normally mention this, if you watch my previous videos, I normally do something like turning my model upside down, right? Like, which is a great refresh, especially like at the end of the night, if you're completely burned out. It's a way to see the model from a totally different angle. And instead of like having that register of a human face, it's basically like becomes a little bit more abstract, because you just like, it's a human face, you can tell, but the forms are kind of like not in an expected order, right? So you're basically like, oh, okay, it's kind of like a nice refresh. And there are other ways, obviously, like to try to, to keep going with your model, it's like for a longer period of time, like flipping side to side, it's like there are a bunch of things you can do. But let's go back here for a second and let's get back to our best reference so far, the stuff that we talked about, this website here, which you guys already saved, which is basically like, it's the best reference you can find for human skin, right? This website right there, Daniel Boschung, or like whatever, however you pronounce his name. And then Boschung, I don't know. And then basically, like if you click in any of those images, like just click zoom, right? Zoom in, you're gonna be able to see those like with super high resolution. If you look at the making of, try to look for Daniel Boschung, making of like pictures or something, and you're probably gonna get an image of him with one robot. It's like kind of like those robots they use like to assemble cars. It's like this giant arm, and if I'm not mistaken, that's what he uses, and with a camera. So that thing actually is controlled, and then he can actually create like a super high resolution by moving little by little and then taking different pictures, and reassembling it as a super high resolution image. So the thing that's interesting is that you can have access to very old skin like this, right? Which I normally mention to my students, if you're modeling someone old, the older it gets, the less visible the pore is going to end up being. There are certain areas that you're going to still see pores. For example, like this area of the muzzle in here, like the upper lip, you're going to see some of the pores, but they're going to start like kind of like relaxing and releasing from, it's almost like they're being held. And then as the skin loses elasticity, they kind of release and they almost blend. And then you're going to see much more of like, it's like micro wrinkles and things like that. Like, it's like, and basically like the little depth of the pore is going to be completely lifted, and it's going to be almost at the surface, So in comparison, if you look at someone, for example, here, obviously you're going to see some, like I said, like around here, you're still going to see pores, right? A little bit more around there. Looks almost like a little bit younger in certain spots. And then around here, you're also going to see some pores right there, right? And then if you go back, for example, if you got someone like 80, 90 years old, you're going to go towards a skin that looks a little bit more like this. And then obviously, depending of, it's like if it's a skin that was beat up by the sun, the entire life of the character, then you're going to see a lot more wrinkles and all that stuff. And to the point that it becomes almost abstract, it's like it becomes like this type of detail here. You see, it looks like a little brain, right? Like the wrinkles, instead of like following a certain direction, they start kind of like mixing and creating those folds that looks like little brains, And I'm going to show you a couple of examples, like very extreme of that. See, the pores are still visible around there, right? But then you switch to someone young, for example, like this Silvano guy, and look what happened here. Like his pores are completely visible, right? And then you can see that it's like the shape of them. And there's a variation of, for the depth of each one of them. There is variation of color. Obviously, underneath, you're going to have like micro blood vessels and things like that, right? You're going to have like these little spots. And but it's a very complex kind of surface. So what we're going to be trying to do, we're going to try to actually idealize that. I mean, like there are ways nowadays you can simply buy a package like the Texture XYZ, which like great products those guys offer, and then get everything for free, right? Like you just like apply in there. As long as you have the right scale and everything, you should be good to go. And the other thing is to try to reimagine this. I mean, like this is the thrill for me, is to actually to try to understand what's going on in here, and basically instead of like copying or trying to create like a perfect copy of what I'm seeing here, I try to go a little bit more abstract and try to imagine each one of those details separate, right? And how I can break this up. And then the way I found that's, it's like the way that works for me, and that's the way that I teach. I start with the pores, applying the pores and making sure that they have a certain distance between them. If they're too tight together, it doesn't work. It looks like you're gonna see like straight away. If you look at our Facebook groups, sometimes you're gonna see like some of the students posting the progress, and sometimes I say, oh, it looks too small, right? Because you can see there's a little bit of an area of breathing between them. They cannot be completely compacted, right? And if you make them too big, with a lot of distance between each one, then it looks like kind of like orange peel, And so it's like this fine line about trying to find the right scale for them. And on top of that, the type of skin is going to change from place to place. There are certain areas that the pores are not going to be visible at all, right? And in certain areas, they're going to be stretched. In some areas, they're going to be barely visible. In some areas, they're going to start blending with a different type of skin. For example, like one thing that I normally say, you know, is like, let's apply the pores everywhere, right? Like everywhere that you're going to be seeing the pores, but not necessarily everywhere in the face. Especially like if you are trying to create like some kind of like variations in certain areas, you cannot apply everything evenly and expect it's going to look realistic, right? It's just like a first pass that we do to make sure that things are in place. And then from that point on, we start like erasing a couple of things or mixing with other ones or sculpting some direction. It's a very complex kind of thing, you know. There is no way at all that we ever going to be able to represent everything that we see like this by basically like hand sculpting anything, right? Maybe you're going to have like some crazy type of scan and like some kind of technology that going to provide us like infinite resolution for our models that probably going to be able to capture something really, really close like this, right? But by hand sculpting, all we can do is to try to understand how those forms are interacting with each other and try to paint an impression of that. Something that from a render, let's say, you know, it's like either from a certain distance like this, if you're doing close-up renders, or something that's like this, right? It has to work for that purpose, but not necessarily, you know, play God in the sense that we're going to be able to recreate every single thing that you see in the skin. We're going to try the best we can to paint an impression of what we are seeing here. So one thing that we're going to notice here is that if you see those pores so visible in this area around here, as you get higher and higher towards the lower eyelid right here, they start disappearing. So you're still going to see some of them around here, and then they start blending with those kind of like bumps, right? Like a lot of people have those bumps, kind of like it's kind of like a under the skin little deposit of fat, you know, it's like little pockets of fat. And then you're going to get them going in surrounding this area. So you're going to have around here. And from this point on here, the pores are not visible anymore. So you have pores all the way until here, right? Which is close to the zygomatic area there. But right at the socket of the eyeball right here, so the orbital, they simply go away. I mean, like they're still there, but they changed like their characteristic, right? Like they become more like those micro wrinkles, and they're not as deep anymore, right? Like they don't form this little orange peel kind of pattern in here. And the same is going to be true for other areas. So when you have around the eye right here, you're going to get like those wrinkles as well, like very thin skin, right? And then the pore is going to start being visible again around here. So you're going to see right here and around the eyebrows, they're going to be very visible. The same pattern is going to kind of come back, but there's a lot of direction as well. If you look at here, look at those little streaks right here, right? There is a direction because there's compression. Everything here is a memory of the facial expressions this person makes, like, you know, his entire life, right? Like it's a memory of that compression. I mean, as you get older, those forms get more and more baked into the skin to the point that an older person is going to have like those permanent expression, like, you know, it's like if someone who is always like tense, right? Like tensing the eyebrows, you're probably going to have those marks in here. And then see like the direction here, how interesting is that? So I just want you guys to take a look at this and go to the website and study the skin even before you start sculpting anything, just to see where those things are actually stretching, for example, creating those micro wrinkles in direction like that, where the pores stop being visible, which is around here, right? Right around the zygomatic bone. And then around here, the mouth, you're probably going to see more of them around here, like the pores. If he was shaved, you would see like more of those pores around here as well, very visible. But then when you get around here, you see what happens. It becomes something else, right? You're going to get again like micro wrinkles, and it's going to have like two directions. One comes from here. I'm going to sculpt in the model so you can see later. Comes from here to here, and then you're going to see those guys here as well. See it? Like there's another direction right here. It's basically like following the shape of the muscle underneath, basically. And then those other ones. So you're going to have like a little bit of a crisscross right there in that area. Then when it comes to lips, it's a mixed bag, right? Because you're gonna basically like, you're gonna have to think about the transition between pores like this, which are gonna be covering the muzzle here, the upper lip, And then you're gonna get to those wrinkles, which is basically like it wraps around the whole lip, right? Like all the way around both lips. You're gonna have those micro lines going around like that. And then at some point they become the pores again. So they stretch and they connect to some pores in there. And then obviously you have like some other directions like that. You have all those little, it almost like looks like a berry, right? It's like those little pieces from the berry in there. So very interesting stuff. And then obviously when you start looking close, look at, see some gross stuff, right? Like there's a black head in there. That is like some weirdness, maybe like some fiber from something here, you know, or a pubic hair. No, just that's gross. Anyway, and then here, when you get like to the nose, you're gonna see like how dense the peach fuzz is, right? It's incredibly dense. And then if you look at someone like her, it's even crazier. Look at that. Crazy, right? Like in the, and the amount of like the variation that the length has, it's pretty crazy as well. And you see how thin it is, right? Normally when we do peach fuzz for our characters, we tend to make it a little thicker so people can see. It's like, oh yeah, here is some peach fuzz, right? But in fact, if you look from a certain distance like this, if you're seeing too much of it, you know, it's like in your character, for example, in her case is extreme. She has a ton of it. Looks like a teddy bear in here. But when you look at someone a little bit younger, right? Like if you're seeing too much of the peach fuzz, maybe it's time to actually make them a little bit thinner. And, you know, it's like, make sure that they barely read. But in her case, obviously, there is a ton in there, right? Let's see, like in his case, if you go from a certain distance, you can barely see, right? You see it breaking up the silhouette in there, but not much. But back to the skin in here. So our plan for this class is gonna be this. We're gonna have to first like find out what's the scale of the pores. And I have no formula for you, unfortunately. What I'm gonna give you as homework is to actually maybe do something I can show you. I can bring this in Photoshop or bring some other image in Photoshop and do a study, you know, it's like just count, do like paint a couple of dots in here just to figure it out, the density of this. And keeping that in mind that this area here of the cheeks is gonna be where the pore is gonna be visible the most. So like cheeks and then the forehead right here around the eyebrows, right? And then for the rest of it, either they're gonna be slightly more compact or a little bit less visible, like in this case here, right? Probably he's gonna have more pores around here underneath the beard itself, but he has the beard, so it's hard to see. So basically what's happening here, there are a couple of things, right? So first, like there's a big mass that's underneath this that's stretching the skin and creating his cheeks in there. So we're definitely gonna get a little bit more of a space between the pores because there's a little bit of the stretch coming from within. Same is gonna happen with areas like the nose, for example, but you can see that the type of skin here is a different one, right? Instead of seeing a ton of those pores in there, you're probably gonna see some of them around this area. And then you're gonna have like some bumps and like little blackheads and stuff like that. And some people have a ton of them. So it's different, right? So if you start looking at the face the way it is right here, you're gonna notice that there is one type of skin that we're gonna represent around the cheeks that's gonna be similar to this one here and around the eyebrows. But then there's a different type around here in the chin and under the lower lip that's gonna go around here, almost like all the way back. And around here also a little bit different as well. It's not going to be as visible, right? And then you have this different type of skin that's mostly like micro wrinkles and those bumps around the eyebrow, the eyes themselves. And you have this different type of skin around the nose, right? Like with a different character to it as well. And it starts becoming like the same character as the cheeks, just around here, right? You're going to see them. And you see how interesting this direction here. So you see some vertical lines in here. They start getting diagonal here, and then they become more vertical around there, right? And very horizontal around here. So all those things, we're gonna be trying to paint this impression of those directions. So when the light hits our character, the eye of whoever is observing is going to recognize as something that's believable. It's like something that has like those micro wrinkles, has the right direction. You start actually, without knowing, you assemble that puzzle in your head as you look at something that looks realistic, and you kind of like understand the process. It's like, so for example, like it's almost like you recount the steps. It was like, yeah, if there is an eye blink, or if there's a frowning or whatever it is that's going to cause that type of wrinkling to happen and create those little details, it's almost like your brain starts to accept it. It's kind of like, yeah, I believe that because I've seen that in my face. I've seen people's faces my whole life. So I can tell that that looks, more realistic, like this type of wrinkles in here, right? But let's go talk about the pores in here. This is actually a picture that a friend of mine took of my ugly face many years ago. And I was already old back then. Now it just got worse. But that's my face in there. And there is all this gross stuff in there. But the cool thing is that my pores are pretty open, right? And so you can see them. It looks like, yeah, it's awful. I know. I have to submit you guys to this, but it's part of the job, So the way that I play, it's like I tell my students about this, is that the best reference I can find for this kind of stuff, like to refer to what I mean by that stuff, it's like the structure of the pore, is to show something like this, right? A couch. Right, a couch or a sofa. That's basically how I see the pores happening. It's like, it's almost like when you're young, full of dreams and hopes. Like no, I'm not anymore. They kind of got crushed at this point. But so you get like those. It's almost like there's a depth to each one of them, right? And this depth is like, it's almost like something is holding that little button down there. So basically, like you see here, right? And then as you age, they kind of start releasing. It's almost like this button here just popped out, boop. And then all of a sudden there is no tension holding it down there anymore. So everything lifts and becomes shallower, right? So that's what's going to happen here as well. So I use like the same type of example. Let's see, not this one. Same type of example. Let's just close this for this. It's like those little, I call like those little sun rays here, right? Like there's a little sun in there. Sometimes I call the butthole brush we're going to be sculpting. And so it's a little sun in there, and you see this little rays going around like that. And you see that from time to time, this stretch here makes them almost like try to reach to the next one, to the neighbor in there. And that's what I see in here too. It's like you have those ones, and you can see those tiny little sun rays here, right? You're kind of like trying to reach to the neighbor in here, like kind of like hold my hand, right? So it's interesting because like when you have that kind of structure, they create a little bit of a network, right? But the thing is, like, if you just simply sculpt the pores themselves, it doesn't hold up. It's like if you just have the pores, even if you sculpt them perfectly, it doesn't hold up because there is more to the facial structure, to the skin structure right there, which is this micro detail that's in between them. So for example, like if I look at just at the pores themselves, right, from a distance like that, I can kind of count them, right? But then in between, there's a lot of this very organic, it's like a, cellular kind of detail that breaks up things further. And that's what's going to create basically like this specular of for a character. I mean, like if I'm working on a character that has no detail whatsoever, right? And I'm trying to achieve something that looks like skin, I'm probably going to have to fake it by removing a lot of the specular and also adding a little bit more of a roughness to the spec, just to create like an impression of what I'm seeing here. But if you're trying to recreate something that's created by nature, the way that you're going to create the roughness is by breaking up the surface many, many times, which is what's happening here. From a distance like this, it looks like very rough. The specular is very rough and broad, right? But when you get really close, look how shiny it is. I mean, like it's like plastic, right? It has a little bit of a glow. It's almost like it has like a double layer of speck in here. One is very tight. The other one's a little bit more glowy, right? But it's very like, it's like this plasticky feel to it, almost like it's not plastic. I mean, like it's more like a jello, right? And then the subsurface scattering from a close up is very, very intense as well. It gets very, very scattery and translucent, right? You look at spots like that, it's like jello. But then that's what we're gonna try to represent. I mean, like when we do our skin, we're gonna try to create something like this, something that's like has enough detail and has enough micro detail in between the detail to be able to recreate this roughness with surface instead of like faking it with maps, you know? Obviously, we're gonna use some shortcuts and probably still use some roughness map just to help. But even the roughness map we can control, you know, we can use like a black and white map to control what goes a little bit shinier and what goes a little bit more broad in spec, right? So the task for you guys, like I said, is gonna be this. So basically like you're gonna create a layer in your Photoshop in there. And just as an exercise, you can start doing something like this. Let me just see if I can get this. So for example, like if you have like a very tiny brush, let's do like maybe like 5 here. You can even count, you know, it's like, oh, interesting. I'm using a different brush, so that's not gonna work. This one, okay. So let's say, let's do a little bit bigger than that. 8 maybe. So let's do like that, for example, right? You can count. Another thing that's good for this exercise here is that basically like if you do it for a little bit, it's almost like you're gonna start like following the pattern, and you're gonna realize that the pattern, it has a ton of variation. So it is a pattern, but it has a ton of variation within this pattern. So the biggest mistake is to actually try to create this distance between the pores exactly the same, and then without any, you know, variation for this distance between them and the positioning as well. So just by doing this here, just marking the position of those pores I'm seeing in there, I can kind of like have an idea about what we're gonna have to do when I'm sculpting those pores in ZBrush, right? Like I'm kind of like, okay, if you do it for a while, you know, it's like you can do this as a practice actually, and just do for a little bit or for a while. And then you can actually start like in your brain thinking like, yeah, I can kind of get it now. You know, it's like the distance has to be enough, but not like huge between them or too tiny. So in this area right here, right? So basically like you can compare even, you know, it's like if you have a picture of the cheeks in here in comparison to the nose, you can actually do the count again. You can have like an idea, for example, like if I do this same thing here, right? Just counting, those ones seem more even in there, but then you get some of them more spread out. So the whole intention here is to create a little bit of a matrix, right, for the pores, but without being completely precise. You're gonna see that between those guys here, they don't have the same distance, right? Because one thing that happens is this. All the stuff I'm talking about, I'm trying to be very detailed about, because it's really hard to get lost with those pores, you know, and get the wrong thing. It's like, it seems like the simplest thing to do, but it's not. I mean, like if you get wrong, it's like a redo basically. But what I'm trying to say is this, look, if I just make triangles between them here, right? If I try to create like little patterns like that, from time to time, you're gonna see that those triangles have like a very, very similar size and shape. But then in certain areas like this, you see like it gets a little bit more abstract in here because the distance now is a little bit different, right? So here, basically like it becomes a square in there, right? So here you have another one in there, or you can split into triangles, whatever. But I mean, look at this, like all those patterns you can get. And it's not like this triangle is exactly the same size as the other one, you know, it's like you're gonna get like different sizes for those triangles. You know, you can split if you want. But the thing is like, we're gonna have to have enough distance between them, and they're gonna have to reach to the next one. So if I go back here, so for example, what I was talking about, those little rays, right? You're gonna see this guy, that guy, and there is one reaching to the next one. So this one here is gonna start like trying to reach to that one, and this one's gonna try to reach to that one. And then you're gonna get this little network, And the interesting thing is that the cut, based like the side view, is going to have like a depth, right? Like, so each pore is going to go down like that, right? And it's going to reach to the next one. So you're going to get like this kind of like pattern like that. And from time to time, it's going to be shorter, sometimes it's going to be longer, right? But the important thing is that you have enough depth and that they come out enough to create those little pillows in between, right? Like there's a little, you know, it's like in between those pores, there's all those forms, they kind of like bulge out, right? So very important to actually pay attention to this, you know, it's like to the distance between them. I get them wrong from time to time and I have to redo. For example, you're gonna see, like I mentioned before, like this area around here, right? Seems like a little bit more broad. And then when you get around here, it seems like they are getting a little bit more tight, right? But overall, they have a very similar distance. And on top of that, once we have them in place, we're gonna actually start exercising, sculpting those wrinkles. They're actually adding this direction here. If you pay attention, there's a direction being caused. This area is stretching, right? There are studios out there that they have techniques to actually recreate this stretch like automatically, but we don't. So we're gonna be sculpting it manually, all this stretch here. And the way I sculpt, I'm gonna show you later. I mean, I get one of those pores and I basically like draw a line on top of it and then micro ones to support it around. And I keep doing this until I have like a lot of direction going, you know? So let's take a look at this in ZBrush, now that we talked about it. But this is my character in there, right? That's the current state. What I did over the weekend, I actually redid the UVs in a way that I got, instead of like two UDIMs like I showed you guys the other day, I actually made 3 of them. So with 3 UDIMs at 8K, even if I use just 50% of each one of them in average, I still get like 100 million polygons covered, or theoretically covered, right? So I should be good with 3 UDIMs for the whole face and shoulders, right? If it's a full body, then not so much. You're gonna need more than that, but face and shoulders, you should be good to go. So let's take a look. At this point here, I didn't subdivide HD just yet because I was waiting for you guys. So what I did over the weekend was just like tweak the face, right? Like I did some more work on the face. He got a little old now, and like definitely gonna have to revisit it. Reuse some teeth and eyes from a previous model, which we are not gonna be talking about today, but later this week or the next week, we're gonna be talking about it. And even though I'm not gonna be going too in depth with the teeth, I'm definitely gonna show how I constructed it and how the shaders look like. So you guys can actually copy if you want. But for now, we're gonna just focus on the HD stuff. So in order to go HD, remember that thing I mentioned, you know, subdivide your mesh with a regular subdivision using geometry, but never pass 2 million polygons, right? Obviously, this is like a number that, you know, even Pixelogic, they mentioned like something around 1 million would be more like a little bit more optimized. But in my experience, like even at 2 million polygons, you're fine. If you start going over that, then exporting HD gets slower and slower. So we try to avoid that. So once you reach the number that you know that the next subdivision level, if you try to subdivide, is not gonna pass 2 million. In this case, you would reach 4.4 million if I subdivide. So I know I have to stop right here. And then I'm gonna make sure that I don't have anything selected. So you can press Control, click, and then open a little window like that. So just make sure that nothing is selected. And then I'm gonna go to Geometry HD. And then I'm gonna just say Divide HD. So I have at this point 58 million polygons, right? 60 million basically. And I have like my model, the way I planned it, it should have around 70 million polygons. So if I reach a number here around 130 million, which is the combination of this and my 70 million that I planned, then I know I have to stop. So I'm gonna divide it. Let's see if I'm in the right subtool here. Yeah. So let's divide it a couple of times. So Geometry HD, 1, 2, 3 times. So yeah, 128 million, right? So at this point, I know that the character should be around like 70 million with HD geometry. So let's go HD with this guy. Before I do that, I'm gonna click my poly framing here, right? And then now I can see the topology in there. So I can go to my polygroups, and then I can say auto groups. If you do just auto groups, it's gonna just like basically like anything that's visible is gonna be grouped, right? If you do UV groups, that's gonna be basically like related to the UDIMs, the number of UDIMs. So you should have 3 of them here, right? 1, 2, 3. But now the best way is to do this one, auto groups with UV, because this one splits all the parts that we have in your UDIMs, right? So if I import here, this is my model with high resolution that I imported before. I'm just gonna hide it for now. And I'm just gonna bring the same base mesh that I'm using in ZBrush, which is the low resolution here. I'm gonna show you the UVs I have right now. Very simple UVs. They look like this. So I have like 3 aisles, right? So basically what that one does, it creates a polygroup for each one of those little aisles, each one of those UVs. When you double click, that's 1, 2, 3. So that's what the ZBrush is doing there, right? So now I have more control because I can just hide a few things if I want to, right? And then obviously you can always like recreate a polygroup that's something that you're gonna be using all the time, for example, just for the purpose of going HD and out. So for example, if something you're gonna use just a face, you can do this like just select this one. I don't need the inside of the mouth. There's still a mess in there. I have to clean that later. I need the nostrils. I need this eyes. I need the carunculus right there. And then let's say I'm not gonna worry too much about the shoulders or anything. So I have this for now, right? But even here, I don't need a couple of things. I mean, like I don't need to be too concerned about the back of the head, for example. So I can just select, let's do a lasso selection here and get rid of, let's say, this area here all the way to here. And even like if you wanna get like a bigger chunk, you can do like something like that, right? So if that's something that you're happy with, of course, I'm not like doing a great job selecting here, but let's pretend you're happy with this. And this is the partition you're gonna be using the most to go in and out of ZBrush. Then you can just select it, make them visible and do like on auto groups or just group visible. Press a couple of times until you find the color you like, right? And then from that point on, if I invert the mask, I can actually make a group just for the rest of it. So now I just have 2 groups, right? So every time I'm gonna go HD, I can just like click and select this one, and then easy, go to the highest subdivision level in order to go HD, go to the highest, right? And then you press A somewhere in there. What I did actually, I actually pressed A twice. So I'm gonna go again. So this is the highest resolution. I'm gonna press A just one time around here in the nose. And that should give me that whole chunk, right? Depending on the topology you have, obviously. If it's a topology that's different from mine, you might get a little bit less, you can get a little bit more, right? But if you have a similar topology than this one, then you should get something around that. So now I have like about 35 million polygons worth of detail for the entire face and the front in here, right? So at this point here, I can start sculpting HD. So let's just do a quick test here just to see if we're getting, yeah, we're getting pore in there, right? So that's good. So let's talk about those pores now. Let's switch this to a different subtool in here. Let's get the plane 3D, like that. And then let's turn on perspective for now. So I'm just gonna select the plane 3D and make polymesh 3D so I can actually sculpt in it. And then I just subdivide it with Control D. So Control D, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. So I got 1 million polygons. I can even do one more, so 4 million polygons like that, right? So I can do something like this. Let me just create a copy of it. So duplicate, right? So I'm gonna keep this one as a reference. This one in the back here is gonna be the reference. I'm gonna draw the pore that I have done before, which is the one I normally use. So I'm gonna just draw it in here. So you can see how it looks like, right? So I'm gonna do something else. I'm gonna go to my display here, display properties, double. So you can see how much it extends. This is kind of like important, you know, because if you do it too sharp, meaning that this this fade out in here is very short. So for example, like it starts very deep and then ends right around here, instead of like extending all the way, you're not going to be able to create that. Did I save that? Oh, it's right there. It's just very tiny. You're not going to be able to create this kind of like network that has like this little waves that I mentioned before here. So like those little waves, right? Going like that. You're not going to be able to connect them if you have something that instead goes like this. Look, it's super deep like that. It comes back, right? And then the other one's going to be flat, 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 flat. And then another one's going to be around there. You're not going to create this nice, you know, in and out that goes from one to another one like that, right? And that's important. That's why getting the size of the pore and how much he extends to towards the next one is very important. So for example, if I get this little pore in here as a reference, this guy here, right? You can tell by the light in here, the way that's hitting, that there is like the outline, it goes all the way around here. That's how much it goes to the side. And this guy here, same thing. It goes like all the way around like that. So basically, like if I do a profile cut, right? It's gonna be like the pore is gonna be around here. And you have like this nice, very extended, you know, distance right here between the pore and the other part of it, instead of having something that's just like super deep and then not enough transition, right? It's a very different thing. So that's going to be, you know, tricky, but I mean, now that I'm explaining here, I hope you guys remembered it. So you see like this transition here is a very long one. It goes all the way to here and all the way to there. So if you keep spinning it, it's going to be similar from all angles, right? And that's important. So you see, like, it doesn't break the profile, for example, like at the top right here, right? It's only carving it. There's a little bit of the profile broken around there, but it's mostly like plain, right? So, so what's going to happen here? So let's put this guy here as a reference on the side. For example, let's bake it around there. So we have just a little reference, like, let's see, the light hits in a way that we can see the butthole. So let's see, Shift S, just to bake it. And let's switch to the other subtool we have. This guy here. I also had 4 million polygons that we copied. So what I meant by that, I mean, like the distance stuff is this. So if you create something that's too deep, so I have 42 for my intensity here. If I do like, let's say like 68, and I did a pore that looks like this, it's actually can go even deeper than that. So it goes very deep. You see like that point in there, how deep it is? Let's go to display properties, double. See, like it goes very deep, right? So it kind of like super sharp. So that's not what we want, right? And if you go to something like 10 here, that's not enough, right? You're not going to be able to see it. So something like visually, that's basically what I expect, something that's on the side. Maybe a little bit less, maybe 40 or 35 here. But something like this would be more what I'm expecting, you know? That level of depth right there and that level of transition. So it's like it's a very slow transition. And then what's going to happen once you have that in place is that if you try to draw, for example, a pattern in here, right, like we were talking about before, I can start like this, right? And another thing I do normally, obviously they're going to show you the sculpture in here soon, but basically like this, the pattern, you see like I have my brush here set to drag rectangle. So when I draw it, I get used to actually draw each one of them in a different direction. So sometimes I start from middle to bottom, left, and then middle to upper right or something, you know, so I can go kind of like trying to generate like a little bit more of a little more pattern, you know, so I can try to reach to the next one. So you see, like, if you have those sculpted correctly, you should be able to create those little pillowy surfaces in between them, right? Because look at the difference between something like this. I'm gonna also increase, some of them gonna have a little bit of a bigger size, and some of them gonna be more offset, right? We don't wanna create that those perfect triangles that we had, like, you know, it's like that I was trying to show. So from time to time, they're gonna be closer and then further, but not by much, just enough variation, right? So this is one thing, right? You have something like that. The other thing is to have something like this, right? There's no connection between them. It looks completely loose, and this doesn't sell the idea this is actually skin, right? So you have to be able to understand that you need like that side view that I drew in Photoshop. You know, it's like to be able to see that pattern, that things can have to go in and out and close enough to each other to create a network, right? Otherwise, they're completely broken. Same deal, like if you have something that's too close like this, like that doesn't sell the idea either, right? So it cannot be this and it cannot be that, right? It has to be something in between, something that you did a drawing here, the other one's gonna be around here, reaching for the next one, the other one around here. So basically like they touch each other in this transition in there, right? And that's about it, you know? So let's go back here and let's do a little attempt to sculpt it. I never get the sculpture the same ever, obviously, because that one was done. And the funny thing is that I did that one without thinking too much. And nowadays, sometimes I have trouble trying to sculpt exactly the same thing. But it was just like, you know, beginner's luck, I guess. But I done like in some of those classes, actually, I did a few of them, brand new ones that I ended up using the whole model and it worked fine. So it's not like rocket science either. So let's just get like a brush in here. Let's say I have one I created here. I created a standard brush. So basically like I clicked on the standard brush and then you can just go to brush clone to create a copy of it so you don't mess up with the original, right? For the alpha, I'm using alpha 39. And then I'm actually clicking the alpha panel and then tweaking this curve from something like this to something very pointy like that, right? Just as a starting point. And then I can actually use a drag rectangle. Let's see what the intensity I have in here. So, oh, okay, it's just my undos. So I'm gonna just do like a reverse version. So I'm using like a drag rectangle. By default, you have dots in here. So I create a brand new standard by copying it. Then I switch from stroke to drag rectangle, switch alpha to 39, and then tweak its curve, right? And then I can just create like a tiny little, you know, it's like a starting point for my pour, which is something like this, like a reverse version looks like that. Also, you see like my focal shifting here is pretty high. By default, it's only 0, right? So by default, if I try to do that, it would create something a little bit different. But if I make it a little bit sharper, I can get something that looks a little bit more like I want it. So I can start with something like this, which is broad enough if I look from a distance like that, right? And let's see, it's not pointy enough, but we can work on that. So let's turn off my perspective here. And then you can use either like, for example, like your move brush to actually make sure that's a little bit pointier from a certain angle, that you have enough of that you know, transition line, right? You can switch to another angle, do a little bit more of that from another angle. Or you can use like a pinch or even like an inflate brush just to help with that. But then this is gonna be just like our starting point for it, right? Now what we can do, we can switch to our clay buildup, which is basically just a clay buildup with a very low intensity at 2 or something. And you can actually add an alpha, let's say like alpha, let's see a bigger one here, maybe 35, something like this. Just gonna smooth it out a little bit, this whole thing. A little bit more smooth here. Either you can start by blocking certain forms. So for example, like, I'm gonna do like stronger so you can see what I'm doing, and then I go to undo. So basically like I'm doing something like this, right? Just like some of them. Try not to do like too perfect. They're gonna have to have like a different intensities and also different distance between each other. So we're gonna have to, let's go a little bit lower than that, maybe 6 or something like that. And I'm gonna just do a few of them like this. I'm not gonna be basing too much on that other one, just slightly. And I'm gonna make sure that I'm not touching too much this area around here. It's almost like it would be good to create a masking here, you know, it's like just to prevent it. Let's try to create a mask like this. Oops, just to prevent. If you wanna hide the mask, it's just Control H, right? You can hide the mask, it's still there. Control H brings it back. So I'm just gonna be creating that because I don't wanna touch this, because I wanna make sure I can actually create that effect that things are connecting, right? So when I reach certain point, I want to stop. Just gonna do this and create this very pillowy kind of surface like that. Just a few of them. And I can start playing with a sharper brush now to define those wrinkles and everything. So I'm gonna smooth it out. Oh, actually I'm using this smooth cloth in here. I'm just switch from smooth cloth to smooth stronger. And then this one I have to be careful because it's very strong. So I'm gonna go, let's see. That's good. Or I can go to a lower resolution and smooth it as well. It helps a little bit. So I can keep doing this, you know, it's like for longer, or I can start actually blocking things. So this is the first brush that I'm using, which is just like this clay buildup with a little alpha, right? 36 that I added in there. I'm gonna switch back to this one just for my other work later. But that's basically what I needed to do. And then you shouldn't get the dotted lines anymore, because that's stuff that happens when you don't have a small setting there. And then for intensity, I'm gonna start with something around like maybe 10, something like this. And then from here, from the center, I'm gonna try to draw, but without making a straight line. So you're gonna try to wobble a little bit. Like that. Some of them are gonna be a little bit longer. Some are gonna be a little bit shorter. Some are gonna branch out like that. And I'm gonna try to follow like this line where I have those little pillows a little visible in there, right? Like you see you can barely see them, but I can see here, kind of like following that line, right? So you can get like, just using the mouse like the tablet sensitivity, right? Just like trying to break some of those, like break it up a little bit. And then from time to time, you can start actually introducing some more random ones like this. You know, from time to time, you can actually break things up and change direction, but without being too repetitive, obviously. So if I have something like this here, I'm gonna try to avoid doing everywhere, right? So just from time to time, like just get a few of them. Don't add too much stuff, otherwise it's gonna get a little bit busy, you know. And remember that a lot of this stuff in between those pores is going to be recreated with the micro bump that we're going to be using later. So at this point here, I can switch back to my which one is the one I use? 35, right? To my clay buildup with a little rounder alpha in there, and then I can keep going here and just detail a little bit more, like making sure that I go in between those forms and create a little bit more of a puffy version of it, right? So just like that. So around here. Really get some of those to read, but if they're getting a little bit too deep, just make sure you can smooth it out and just reduce my smooth a little bit, but just enough to break up those forms here. And then we can play, you know, it's like add some more of those, maybe like with a lower intensity, and then a bigger brush, just lower intensity and bigger, maybe like 4. Then I can actually cut it and create a little bit more of a longer line in there. Something like that. Just break it up right there too. And then slowly you just like build up those forms. And at the end, let's see, just do a little bit more. Just, you know, this is just like a quick demo, but let's get some of them a little bit thinner now. I do a little bit more random here. Not that one. So let's say something like this, which you definitely can do much better because you're gonna spend some more time. But basically, something that resembles that, you know. Now to get a little bit more sharpness in the middle, you can always use a little bit of the inflate brush. So if you get the inflate brush, try to not use like the 10, which is the default amount. Like around 5, you can get a little bit of that to compress, right? And then from here, if you need a little bit more depth, you can go back and just like manually bring it in. Gonna just smooth it out because the inflate, if used too much, it actually crunches things a little bit. This is another thing you can do as well. I use this for sculpting, for example, eyelids and things like that. You sculpt from this angle here, right? So we can actually incorporate very tiny details like this, just by sculpting the reverse version of it. Sometimes it's easier to see what you're doing. So if you want to do like super small details, you know, you can do like from this angle here. And for eyelids, it's great because you can just go over this line like that, right? And get things very, very sharp. So once you have something like this, which like doesn't quite look like that, right? I would have to, you know, probably dig those lines a little bit more, a little bit deeper, something like that, to get a little bit more of that feel. But let's say we are done with this. The way I capture it, a little bit deeper around there. The way I capture this is basically, oh, you see like around here, that selection that I did, maybe not the best, you know, covering up that thing because it's definitely going up a little bit, but it should work, you know. It's just like smooth it out around here now that I removed the mask. Then let's say like you got the brush in there. What I'm noticing here is that I need some of those to extend a little bit more in relation to that one. I was not basing on that one, but now looking at it, it makes sense that they are a little bit longer in certain spots. So if I have something like this, now to capture it, some people would use like just the alpha. So they would just click alpha and just say grab document. So in that case, you would have to have like a zoom like this to make sure that you capture it. But in my case here, what I'm gonna do, I use like an old school trick, which is this one here is a brush, and it's a very interesting one. I keep looking at it, I just want to do a little more sculpting because it looks a little funny, but it should work, you know. I'm just gonna do a bit more like a fleshiness in the middle. So basically like it's this brush here. So you zoom in, let's do something around here, which I can capture just that area in the center in there. Something like that, a little bit blown out of the screen in there. And then it's a brush called MRGBZ Grabber, which is a very long name. And it's part of the 2.5D brushes right here. This one here, you're gonna see there's a sphere and everything. And what this is gonna do is this. So first you make sure that the perspective is off, right? Perspective is on here, so off. Just make sure it's flat with the screen. To lock it, you press shift, right? Like if you press shift and keep rotating, it locks. Basically, it's gonna snap. So with shift, now it's perfectly aligned with the screen. Because if it's not aligned, then you're gonna be in trouble. You know, it's like trying to represent this in a certain angle. But if it's aligned here, you should be good to go. So let's do this. and then I'm gonna click the mRGBZ grabber. You're gonna get a message here that says that basically like the active tool is 3D. It's asking you if you wanna switch to 2.5D basically. So you say, yes, switch. So now you're in 2.5D, right? And you're using that brush in there. So the way it works, you start from the center. So I'm gonna try to find the center in here around there. And then if you press shift, right, it locks into a square. So you see like it's a rectangle. If I press shift, it locks into a square. So I keep dragging it all the way until I don't see any interference in the surface. It has to be completely flat, right? Something like this, let's say, right? So now I have two things here that happen. One was a texture, which I don't need. I can just click texture off. And then the other one is the alpha itself, which was created in there, right? That's all we care about. So let's switch back here to our plane 3D. And let's do a few tests. So Control N is gonna clear the screen because it's 2.5D. Control N, like Nancy, right? And then you're gonna draw again the plane in here. So we're gonna start with a brand new plane, make polymesh 3D. You're gonna subdivide a few times, 4 million. And then we're gonna test that brush we just created. So to create a brush like that, you go to your standard, right? Standard brush, click clone. So we have a copy of it. Click the drag rectangle, and then select the last one you just created, depth grab right there, right? So at this point here, we don't know the depth yet, and a lot of stuff is gonna look very weird. So check this out. So if I try to apply straight away, you see a couple of things happening here. First is bulging out, right? It's creating this bulge out in there. And the second doesn't have enough depth, right? It's very shallow. Let's switch back here to display properties, double, right? You can see like it's very, very shallow right there. So we have to fix both things first. So the first one we're gonna do, let's do a depth a little bit deeper. So I'm gonna put around like 40 something. So it looks better in terms of depth, but still bulging out, and I don't need that, right? So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna actually do the focal shift all the way to -100 here. And now you're gonna see something weird. It's gonna create a square like that, right? It's a square, but at the same time, it's not bulging out in a weird way. It's completely flat in here. Now I just have to figure out what's this distance here to disguise that little border a little bit at the end. So what I'm gonna do is this. I'm gonna go to my alpha. And then here you're gonna see there is a slide that's called the mid value, right? So if I crank this one all the way to something, let's start with 95 and try it out at 95. And that step should be much smaller now, but it's still visible, right? Let's, I'm just gonna dock this. Let's just click this little thing here to dock it so I have access to it at all times so we can do some tests. So let's try at 98. Let's see if he increases this. No, it's better now, right? At 98 is better. So let's try even higher at 100. And now it passed a little bit to see like now it's negative. So I can tell that's 99. And if I still see something at 99, I can disguise it. So it's barely visible, right? There's a little bit on the side in there. It's kind of like not perfect. But then if I add a little bit of radial fade in here, let's do just like maybe 3. Now we got a much better result. If you want more fade, you can actually use a higher number, like let's see, try 8. And then you get something like this, right? So now you basically created your butthole brush, right? Which is like you're gonna go to your brush, save as, and save in a spot, for example, where you can find it. You can put like in your ZBrush startup, for example. So Pixel Logic 2001. And if you go to your Z startup, right? You can save here under your brush presets. So you can put it right there. Or you can save in some other spot where you can find with the light box, right? But at this point here, you have this brush, and now you can start actually exercising and seeing, you know, it's like how it's working. It's not like as good as the other one I have, right? But it should be good enough to recreate the pores from this point on, right? Again, like try to avoid this, right? Super distance in bigger variations of scale, and try to avoid something that's too close like that, right? One on top of each other. It's like, it's a combination of the right distance that you're drawing to create like the right size. And then they have to actually create this stretch, just like that couch that we were looking at, right? They have to create this stretch. And try not to do something like this, right? Like 1, 2, 3, perfect triangle, and then perfect triangle right there, you know, something like that. Instead of that, from time to time, you offset a little bit. So break that pattern of the perfect triangle, you know, and then maybe a little bit more distance, maybe 2 distance right there. And then, you know, something like that to create a little bit, you can tell that's a structure, but without being like a machine-made structure, you know, it's more like a little bit more random. So that's how you create the little pore brush, which you're gonna be using a lot from now on. So after you create the pore brush, what's the next step? The next step is to cheat. And in the first class I taught, I actually sculpted everything by hand, with one single pore, right? Which was brave and stupid, but I'm not that young. That was last year, so a long time ago. So what I do nowadays is basically just create an array of pores. And to create an array of pores, you can do that same thing. For example, you can create like a, let's say, selection, right? You can start with the selection just as a reference point, something like this. Let's say something like that would be my selection. Fine. And then from this point on, I can start actually placing my pores. Let's start like, for example, like with around like this perimeter in there, but without being completely precise with the perimeter, just, you know, close enough. And then from this point on, I'm going to start closing this. And again, like, you're going to have to make sure that the distance between them, it's like convincing, right? It's not that super huge gap between them, that the size of them is good as well. So once you have all this entire thing covered with it, like this entire circle covered with it, you should have something, let's say, let's see if I have it here, multi-porous, let's see, porous multi, this one. So basically, I'm gonna draw in here, you're gonna see that's my multi-porous one, looks like this. See, they have like less detail, right? Like less of those little rays. But it's basically like they started with the same brush, this one here, the one that I had before, that I used for the demo. And then I actually, you know, created an array of them. So now I have this array here I can use for everything. So instead of like having to draw everything one by one, it's much more, you know, it's much easier to actually cover a huge area of pores just by using this. So you can tell, like looking at the patterns in here, that they have a structure, but you see like this one is way closer to those ones. Then, you know, it's like you don't see like perfect triangles, you know. It's like I try to make sure that things are a little bit more random. But even when I sculpt with this, sometimes I actually decide after I place this whole pattern to actually break up further. So I add one like kind of like lost right in the middle, like in between those, you know. Sometimes I do something like that. But let me show you how this works. And then how you capture it the same way. So you turn off your perspective, right? Making sure it's like all the way, like covering the screen around here. If you want to move to a second monitor that has a bigger resolution or something, you know, here is just like 1080p, but it should be enough. You know, it's like I wouldn't go too big with the resolution. If you're seeing something like this in your screen, should be a good size already. So basically the same thing. Click Texture X EMR GBZ grabber, right? Try to find like the you know, approximate center of it. I don't know exactly where it would be, but around here, let's try. And then press Shift. And then that should be good enough. So if you have something like this, now you created it again, right? So if I texture off, and now that's my depth in there. Same thing, you can just go create a duplicate of your standard brush, plug this one in there with drag rectangle, and you should be good to go. So let's try to apply this now and see how things work, if they're gonna work at all. And then, so let's draw this guy here, edit, Control N, clear it up. Now I know this is HD, is already 35 million there, right? There's a brush, look at that brush there. I create something else, I don't know. But one thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna put this brush in there as well. So I'm gonna go to Preferences and Config, Enable Customize. I'm gonna click Brush, and then I'm gonna go to where I have my pour single and I had the pour multi right here, right? So I'm gonna press Control Alt, and I'm just gonna drag it right here. So it's always accessible for us, right there. And then I'm gonna just do Preferences, Enable Customize off, and then Start Config. So now it's gonna be there for the next session as well. So I'm gonna click on it, and we're gonna start by adding those pores in this area here. Now, you see, I have a facial expression in here. So that makes things a little bit trickier, right? Because I'm gonna have to be careful, because if I simply apply them and never bother to actually sculpt the stretch in those pores, it's gonna look very artificial, right? So it's almost like I'm gonna have to put like a first pass and then go on top of it and just sculpt the direction of each one of them. So let's go back in here. Let's put on the side. Something like that. And let's go to our Photoshop, which we have a picture. Actually, not Photoshop. Let's get the picture itself. I was about to show you guys this as well. Let's do a quick reviewing here. This is like pictures we took of each other, like was me and a colleague at the ILM, Philip. And this is like an expression he was making. And you can see that the pores, although they're almost invisible here, when you do this compression in here, they become visible again. So you can tell that they're right there. Like, and also, how cool is that? You know, the compression, like the blood flow, you know, it's like the way that it kind of like seizes in certain areas, you become like greenish yellow, right? Where you have this pressure in there. So very cool if you have a facial expression to actually paint those effects, you know. Again, like certain studios have ways to actually detect the compression and generate this type of effect to cut the blood flow, you know. It's like on the fly, basically, like just based on the geometry. But in our case, we're going to be painting stuff by hand, so it's a cool study, you know. I thought about sharing that one. You know, it's like that thing that I mentioned about her chin before, the old lady, that becomes kind of like a brain. Look at that. It's pretty much a brain, right? And then I get like this is a colleague from Brazil. I took a couple of pictures of him, but I normally go to the internet, you know, it's like, and I get like those references. And it's so cool, you know, it's like to see those marks in the face, you know, it's like how much it changes, right? Like, and I'm fascinated with the old people, first because as a sculpture, you know, study is pretty rich, right? Like the amount of forms and everything. The way I tell people is that I can consider each one of those things like a lower eyelid, for example, a whole creature in itself, right? And as a creature and as a sculpture, you're gonna have like your primary forms in there, you're gonna have your secondary forms, and you're gonna have your tertiary forms. So the way I see like older people like that is just this massive amount of, you know, reference for sculpting that's more than what you expect seeing like in a young human, right? Like it's amazing, like the amount of, you know, the complexity in those forms. It's a great case for study. So that's why I'm fascinated. And also because I tell people this as well. My family, my side of the family, I mean, people died very young, you know. It's like I don't know anyone who had lasted more than 60 something years. You know, it's like all my grandparents, and my mom died, she was 55. My dad died, he was 32, you know. So, you know, all kinds of different things going on. So I don't know how long I'm gonna last, but hopefully longer than them. But in contrast, my side of my wife's side of the family, they last like almost 100 years, man. Every single one, like they died 92, 93, 95, you know. So hopefully I'm improving the gene pool for my kids by marrying my wife. But you never know. Life is weird. So yeah, that's part of my fascination with the old people, you know. It's like, because like I wish I had like a grandpa, you know, it's like I could actually ask, like, tell me stories and stuff. And then when I see these people, you know, I can tell like all the stories, you know, it's like in those faces, like all those marks, you know. Then there's the mirror. Yeah, so, you know, fascinated with this stuff for sure. So let's just get back to the work here. Let's do a little work and just open one of those. How is it going, guys? Sorry, I'm actually pouring a lot of information at you guys and rarely pausing to ask if everything is okay. um, uh, so far, so good. I mean, any questions about this process?
I wanted to ask, do we break the symmetry and would add the wrinkles later in the course, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay.
So what I tell people is to actually keep as symmetrical as possible. And I mean like completely symmetrical in order to apply like this first pass of pores. Just to make sure that you guys are not doing the job twice, because it's a little bit of a torture. It's a lot of pores to cover everything. But then once you have the first pass of the pores, if you guys want to break the symmetry, totally fine. I mean, like even at the beginning, if you're trying to match, for example, you know, it's like a reference, like for likeness, you can actually start with a symmetrical topology and make the model asymmetrical from the get-go, and just save that one before you go HD. Save it as export it as an OBJ, any way you want to do it, and then go to your deformation and then smart presim and make a symmetrical version just for the purpose of the pores and the micro wrinkles as well, like pores and micro wrinkles. The main wrinkles and the things that are a bit more characteristic, then yes, then we're gonna do this completely asymmetrically later. But we definitely wanna save some time. So I'm gonna start with this area right here in the cheeks. And the thing that's gonna be interesting in my case here is that looking at the pictures of those guys, since they are kids, right? Like they died young, but they have like this very thin skin that's kind of like an old person skin. I don't even know how much of the pore is gonna be able to see, you know? So I'm gonna have to be careful about how much I add. So the first thing you're gonna do every time you enter a session of HD like that, I would strongly recommend to use the morph target and just save a morph target. It's gonna work just for the session here, but it's still gonna be able to recover anything that I mess up. So I'm gonna make sure that I have everything symmetrical, right? So I'm gonna go to transform, activate symmetry, hopefully X, right? Unless you have your model rotated 90 degrees, but hopefully X should be the one. And then we can start with an area like, you know, corner of the nose in here, just get the feel of it and try to get like the distance a little bit closer to what we are seeing there. So if I drag in here, let's expand it around, I'm kind of like eyeballing in here, right? But I would say like the scale looks all right. If I did something that's like this, not so much, right? You don't buy that that's actually skin right there. Or if it's something like that either, right? Those are gigantic pores. So we're gonna try to find that happy medium in there. And then you're gonna ask like, whoa, but this brush is round. How you deal with the in-betweens? Well, the in-betweens actually covered with the manually placed in the pores. So that's the part that sucks, but it's good. So for example, like if I have like the size of my brush here, you see the edges of the brush, like the red part. So that indicates the size of the placement in here. So I can use that, for example, at any time to grow or shrink it just to measure approximately this area. And then I can transfer to the next one. So I know I can actually drag from here and I'm gonna have just a tiny gap in between. So I'm just gonna go from here to here. And I'm not gonna care about the lips at all because I saved the morph target, right? So I can, let's see if this is gonna touch the middle part here. If it's touching the middle, not too bad. But I would rather not touch the middle because I like to sculpt everything asymmetrical right in the middle. Let me try to do this a little bit lower here, perhaps around here. Yeah, so they don't touch each other. It's crossing a little bit. Let me try again one more time from here. Oh man, I missed it. Try there. Okay, that should work. So let's spin it a little bit like that. That should be good. And then let's go to this corner around here. And obviously this is gonna look a little weird for a while, you know, it's like you're gonna be just placing those pores without, you know, it's like there's no, not a lot of connection, nothing that's holding them together at this point, right? We're just placing them here. And again, there is no stretch for the skin, nothing. So basically like we are just blocking things. We are adding them. So we have the pores in place. It's actually, this area here gonna make them a little bit bigger because my reference there showed they're a little bit more spread out. So we're gonna do something like that. And then when I get to this area here, I'm gonna have to completely ignore them and erase them. But thankfully we have our brush in there, our morph target saved. So even if I invade that whole area that I'm not supposed to touch, right there, right, like around the eyes, I still can do that. Let's get around here. Let's measure it a little bit smaller like this. And then probably around here. Oh, a little bit more distant, right around here. Gonna go back here and measure a little bit bigger. Get the distance transferred in here. Something like that. And then you can spin it too. So, you know, you get a little bit more variation as well. So slowly we start covering the whole thing. And then obviously, if you do a better job than I'm doing here, you can actually prevent those large gaps that you're gonna have to be sculpting by hand later, right? So first we're gonna just cover it, but if you work smarter than me, you're probably gonna be able to do a better job creating the least amount of gaps possible so you don't need to do a lot of manual work, you know. Just gonna do around here again. And that's the thing that I want you guys to acknowledge, you know, it's like if you're doing something like this, it's gonna look weird. Sometimes, you know, it's like students, they kind of like stop working on the pores at this stage, basically just add some wrinkles and then they're done, right? This is just really a first pass on everything. There's a lot of work involved that we're gonna be exploring the next days, stretching those things, smoothing some areas, adding more like different brushes to mix with those ones. There's a lot of stuff, you know, it's like if you simply deliver a model that looks like this, that doesn't look like skin at all. So this is just like a first block, you know, first pass on everything. So keep that in mind that, you know, it's gonna look weird for a little bit until we start actually mixing things together and filling up all those gaps. So do not desperate just yet. And do not stop working after the pores are in place because there's still a lot of work left after that. But then again, I mean, like this is kind of like the kind of exercise that's, I think is valuable because maybe at some point you're not gonna have access to a certain type of skin, you know, it's like you wanna create something by hand, or maybe sometimes you wanna be able to just like fill some gaps by creating your own thing. But the thing about those classes that I try to do is encourage my students to do this out of curiosity, like you know, how to reinvent those things, right? Like you know, reimagine you know, the skin and things like that, and as a way of having some kind of like pride in the process too, because I try to imagine this almost like being stamps you're stamping on a clay, you know, on the clay. Basically, like of course, like you don't have access to something like this, but like clay sculptors, they have like all kinds of stamps that they use, right? Like to help them out. And then obviously there's a lot of manual work involved in everything, but there are techniques used, you know, that just help with that. So let's say now, let's just add some more around here so we cover this little gap. And then let's do a little bit of a manual sculpting as well. So this is stretching around there a little bit. Let's just ignore that. So let's say around here, let's erase some of that stuff. First, let's just get those maybe around here as well. Let's get some around there, barely touching them there. And again, like for his type of skin, I'm doing all this work here to demonstrate for you guys, but at the end, I might erase a lot of them. Not erase completely, but like really make things much, much more subtle, you know? that's basically what I did with my albino lady. I demonstrated in class, you know, it's like everything with the deeper pores to be able to show. And then later on, I just like soften everything. It's always a matter of like what your character is demanding, you know. It's like if it's a younger person like me right there, right? You probably going to have much more visible pores. And then if it's someone older or someone with a condition like he has, then it's the kind of stuff that's going to have to guess what's going on or do some more reading about it, obviously. So now that I covered everything, remember that everything started with a single pore that we actually created an array from it. So I'm going to just try one in here and see if the depth is good enough, because I have to make sure that the depth is very similar to the depth I have. Oh, this is the old one. Oh, oh dude, I switched the alpha. What did I do? Did I do something here with alpha? Did I switch to? Huh, interesting. Let's try to reload this one. Let's see if I can do that. Brush, load brush. Because at this point, it actually messed up my single pore. How dare you? Pixel Logic, ZBrush, ZBrush, just startup, and then brush presets, alpha, let's see, pores, random pores, single 2. Let's try that one. Okay, that looks better. Let's try that, let's see. Yeah, so let's see if the depth is okay. The depth is at 40 right now, but it might be a little bit deep if I compare. Oh, it's actually about right. So basically, like once I have those, the single pore back in there, so I can start actually covering those gaps by drawing, like I said, like, you know, a little bit more randomly. You just like you drag one from top to bottom, bottom, top, and then side to side, you know, until you get like a little pattern that make them blend, right? When I get to this area here, there's a little bit of a stretch in there. I can actually go there. And this, like, you know, it's the first pass. I'd be like, this is gonna get, if we are doing everything right, it's gonna get better and better. Oh, another thing I forgot. Am I doing everything symmetrically? Yes, because sometimes I forget, man, and then it's just like, oh fuck, I'm gonna have to cover that whole area by hand again. You know, that's why I'm saying that it's so important to keep everything symmetrical at the beginning, because it's a pain if you forget. And then obviously when you get around this area here, you're gonna start like, okay, I can make a little bit tighter here maybe. So I can put some in-betweens around there. So yeah, it's as a lot of stuff, you know, it's like when you see artwork out there, it looks like, sometimes it looks very complex. It is complex in the context of everything put together, but you know, it's like if you break down all the process, everything, it starts very simple, right? Like it's just like you block the forms and then, you know, or in this case here, you create one pore and then you create an array of pores and then use them to stamp things. And then the final result looks very complex and everything. But if you break down everything in small parts, things can be quite simple, you know. It's just, it's simple, but it has to be done carefully, obviously. Otherwise, it doesn't quite work. And it's probably like not the kind of stuff that you guys gonna get like straight away first try, right? But the second try, maybe, sometimes the third try, right? You're gonna get it. And I'm not gonna be surprised if you guys get it like the first time, you know. It's like, I hope you guys can do that. It's just a matter of like really paying attention to the sizes, right? To the distances, things like that. But you see, like very quickly, you can actually cover a huge area. And I mean, by quickly, I mean like, if you're in this process here doing that kind of stuff, I mean, like I would do a much better and a much faster job if I wasn't talking like I'm doing right now. And also with some music, right? Like if you have some good music to listen to, that's the kind of stuff like that puts you in the zone, you know. It's like you just vanish in the work, right? Like it's the kind of stuff like it might seem like a torture when you've never done before, but I learned to kind of like and enjoy the process. It's just like I don't see the process happening that much when I'm in the zone. It's like if you playing some music, it's like I'm into progressive music, so listening to some Opeth or some Haken or something like that. Haken, right? Haken. Then things go pretty fast.
Do you suggest using layers when we are doing this? So later, if we need, like, we can increase or decrease the strength of the layer when we are exporting the displacement map?
Yeah, unfortunately, the HD geometry doesn't support layers.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it sucks, man. It doesn't support like textures either. It's like you can poly paint. That's basically how we're gonna be texturing everything. But you cannot import textures into it because the UVs are completely gone. It's like when you enter HD. So yeah, that's one of the limitations, of HD geometry. But that's the workaround I said. It's like if you have the morph target saved, if I just click switch here, you're gonna see that's basically my model before and after, right? So if you have that in mind, then you can just use like a morph brush. And then you can morph, for example, like if I want to clear up this area here, it's just to like a higher intensity. See, it's just like you raise that. And the same way you can use like a very low intensity and just like raise things a tiny little bit in certain areas, like right here around the nose. So this is very useful if you're mixing things, it's like if you go to an area which you start sculpting around the eye in there, right? So for example, like you can start with the pores around the whole thing and just go with the morph brush and just like remove some of them and make them slowly fade around this area like that. So that's the purpose of using the morph brush in this whole situation here.
Hey, Chris.
Yes.
Can I ask a question about how you're placing these?
Uh-huh.
So I've been placing them one by one.
Yeah.
I haven't been using the array things. I just went off of the recommendation you did on one of your other videos where you said, give it a shot placing them one by one.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I guess my question is now I'm sitting here watching you do it again, is I've placed like a couple thousand of these things now. And I'm like 10 hours in and I'm just kind of like sitting here watching you do it. And I'm like, am I being too like anal about making sure that like at least a couple of the little, little streaks coming out of the pores overlap? Because I feel like when I place things, I'm like leaning into my computer and dragging it out and spinning it around to make sure it lines up. Am I just like still slow, or am I being too precise about how these things touch each other?
Yeah, I mean, like as a first go, I mean, like I think it's important for you to take the time and actually do what you're doing, so I can really think about the process. And after you do that, I think it becomes kind of like second nature, it's like you're not going to think too much. And when you start doing the renders, you're going to be able to try and see, okay, so, it's like this whole area here that I just spent, hours doing. For all intents and purposes, I mean, like when I render it, it looks very similar to this area I didn't spend too much time. So how much of that time I should be applying to it? And then eventually you're going to come to conclusions like I did, it's like, you don't need like absolute precision or the perfect overlap and everything. You need like an average distance and an average spread. It's like each one of them has to spread enough to touch and to create that little network. But it's not really something that has to be completely precise. You see, I have my array in there, but from time to time, you see like I'm actually adding one or two in betweens in here. It's just because I feel like, it's like there is room to add some more stuff. So it's like it's not absolutely precise, man. The only thing I want you to check is that before you do like thousands of them, like you said, if you can sculpt, like, for example, a smaller area, I would say like start with the cheeks. And then if you're not sure about the sizes, do a quick render first, and see if things are working. By the way, I'm going to be showing you guys how to render this very soon. I'm going to just add a little bit more here. But yeah, man, I hope the size you're adding there and everything is like, it's really good because you're being so careful, because it would suck to redo everything by hand.
Well, I've already redone about 500 of them because I figured out my UVs were messed up. But I may post a picture in the group and see what
Okay.
people's opinions are, because yeah, it's kind of brutal.
Yeah, man.
I think I'm close, but I'd love to see what other people think before I commit to doing, you know,
Oh, definitely, man.
first the face.
Yeah, I try to tell this to people, like, before you go too crazy with the pores, just like do like a small portion, you know. And yeah. And talking about the group, guys, I was slammed this weekend, and obviously, like, there's a little bit of uh, you know, it's like distraction in the whole thing as well, because I keep checking, like, and posting my memes in my private page, and I feel bad because I'm not replying to what actually matters, which is like you guys asking for feedback. But it's in my schedule to actually do part of it tonight, and then hopefully finish up tomorrow. You know, it's like it's probably like just a few days delayed now, because I did this a few days ago, and it shouldn't be too delayed, you know. But I just don't want to leave you guys hanging, especially people in this class, you know. That's the problem, you know. It's like we have like this class mixed with everyone else from all the other classes, which is cool for networking and everything, but it becomes a little bit messy, you know, because I feel like, okay, if I give you guys feedback in there, then I'm going to have to give to everyone, right? And then you guys are definitely the priority at this point. But I definitely going to do that, man. It's the kind of stuff like I have to do. And if I wait too much, I mean, like, it becomes this, it snowballs a lot. That and my private messages, man. Private messages and emails. I mean, like, there's some accumulation. And then, but I'm kind of like, you know, it's like I'm pretty good at multitasking. But there are certain times that I just have like, man, I need to get this thing done before I can actually focus on anything else. And that's kind of like the mode I am right now. You know, it's like trying to get a few things done before I can actually switch and then do that. But I wish I had like an extra school, you know, it's like with more people working on it, but just a single person with a full-time job and kids. I mean, it is hard, man, but I try my best. I will review some stuff after the class. And we're going to discuss the you know, it's like the time and everything for our actual reviews coming up this weekend, which is, those ones are the ones that I take my sweet time. If you watched any of the previous ones, there is one actually went for, I think, like in a single day for 8 hours or something. It's just because I feel like since we have just like 2 of those reviews, like they are bi-weekly, I feel like, okay, I'm going to try to give everything I can to that specific person, you know, because you guys are waiting for it. So sometimes I take like 10, 15, even 20 minutes talking to a single person, you know, and trying to make sure that the information is all there. So that's going to happen. But I'm going to let you guys know and give all the links and everything to the Google Drive. And all the instructions going to come in the next, I would say like 3 days. So like around Wednesday, you should get something about that. And then the deadline is normally on Friday night. And then so we're going to have like 2 groups. One's going to be Saturday morning and the other one Saturday at night. So we can all reach each other, you know, it's like across the world if you have like a different time zone. Make sure everybody has a chance to review. So at this point here, let's say, you know, I'm going to keep going with this. Obviously, you're going to have to do like this whole area, right? And keep going. But for a first pass, let's say I'm happy with like just covering up stuff for now. And then I have the choice here in this area, right? Like to just use a little morph again and just like blend this area that's weird and just sculpt it again. Or I can just like carefully cover it up. Now for this area here, since I know I'm gonna be using more stretch than anything else, right? Like it's not gonna be a lot of super visible pores like we discussed before. So what I can do here, just as a quick demo, is to actually use my, let's do the morphing here. Actually, I don't know if I should do this because I'm gonna have to cover everything before I do it. Yeah, let's leave this for tomorrow. So tomorrow we go from those pores, which hopefully are gonna have this entire face covered with them. you see, like in a few minutes, we did a good chunk of it using this, array, right? And then the in-betweens, you see, like easily. The only problem is definitely like the size of them, the scale of them in relation of each other and how they touch each other. But the rest should be fine. And then for tomorrow, we're going to be talking about like smoothing out like this area and making it a little bit thinner, and then start adding some directionality. I'm going to talk about the other brushes that I'm using and everything. And then also for the nose, there's different ones I'm going to be showing. It's like I have some kind of like a black hat brushes and things like that. But what I want to do now is actually export this and render it so we can see the depth and everything, right? So the best thing about HD is the speed this exports. And now I only have 3 UDIMs, so it should be pretty fast. So let's say I'm happy with this. I can do a little bit more here just to blend it, right? But I would say like I'm only doing this because I have to demonstrate it for you guys. But I would spend, if I were you, I would spend more time here covering things with them in the same session, and then using the morph to blend them like I'm doing right here, to just remove them from this area of the nose, from this area here, starting around the zygomatic bone, right? And just blend them to have like these nice transitions in there, right? But since I have to keep moving, I'm gonna just stop right here. I'm gonna press A to get out of HD. Once you're out of HD, even if it looks weird, let's get back to this. Even if it looks weird in here, try not to smooth those things out, because I show you guys what happens, right? Like sometimes it gets very messed up. I mean, like when you go back to HD, they deflate, they look weird. So just ignore this the way it is. If you want to mess with anything at this point, let's say like secondary, primary forms, try to go like a couple of subdivision levels lower like this, and then you can keep working here. But never at the highest here before HD, because yeah, it kind of counters what HD is doing at this point. So let's go through the process of exporting everything. First thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna just double check if my UVs are correct. So let's see if I go to my, let's try this. If I go to my plugin, and then let's go to UV master, and I can just say like work on clone, right? And I can just say flatten. So if I flatten it, basically like those are the UVs I have, right? So I have like 1, 2, 3 UDIMs, which is great. So that's exactly what I need. So unflatten, so I know this is the correct model. Let me switch back to my model there, because it creates a different subtool for the thingy. And let's switch to my basic material again. Right. So I have, I just confirmed that my UVs are correct. I have like 3 UDIMs, and then I'm at the lowest resolution of the model, right? So before I do anything, I'm gonna generate now my model that I'm gonna be iterating in Maya from now on. So basically, like, I'm gonna go one subdivision level is higher than that. So at the lowest, I have 17,000 polys. One subdivision level higher than that is 69,000. I'm gonna be using this model in Maya instead of the lowest res. Because of my XGen, I like to have more access to more polygons like this. And it's not super high res anyway. 69 should be good. So just gonna export it first, the mid resolution one. Let's go to, let's see right here. So Sammy, let's go to OBJ. And this one I'm gonna export as MR, which is mid resolution, right? So MR, I'm gonna put like 3 here. So base mesh MR3, that's gonna be my new base mesh for Maya, mid resolution. Then I'm gonna go to the lowest, and I'm gonna export again. And this one is gonna be, where is MR3? This one's gonna be LR3, so that's lower resolution, 3. So now I have the mid res and the super low res saved in the hard drive. So this is a funky way of thinking about it, but it totally makes sense in the, if you're Ofer, the guy who programmed ZBrush. So it works like this. The whole intention with this is to make sure that what we're exporting out of ZBrush is a precise representation of the displacement map in comparison to the level we are exporting, right? So we're gonna do this. We're gonna delete the morph target. And then now we're gonna store switch. So 2 steps, right? Again, store, switch. And then you're gonna do import. So now that you should do the store, switch, import, you're gonna import the lower resolution, like the LR we just exported. And now from this point on, nothing changed because you just exported this model, right? What I'm doing is basically like re-importing the same model on top of it, and it's creating a buffer. So I'm not pressing switch or anything. So once you do this, please don't go up in resolution levels and don't click switch again or anything like that. Once you do, I'm gonna do the process again so you remember it. Basically, like if you have any morph target saved, delete it. So 3 steps: store, switch, import, base mesh 3LR. From this point on, don't touch it anymore. You're done, right? Only thing you can do here is save your file. Very important to save your file before exporting displacement maps, because there is a bug that sometimes happens, and I hope they have it fixed, but the bug is like this. If there is a problem with the multi-map exporter, something, the memory gets funky or something, it kind of like locks your ZBrush in a weird state. You see, like my subtool right now is named base mesh LR3, right? When I start exporting the maps, you're gonna notice that it's gonna be renamed to output something. And if you get it's like this bug to happen to your scene, you're gonna notice that once you're brought back from exporting the maps, instead of like renaming back to the original name, which is base mesh LR3, you're gonna see just output something. At that point, don't save your file on top of your same file or anything. Just close everything and reopen your ZBrush, because that scene is basically fucked. Yeah, if you have output in here after the process is done, your UVs are completely lost. There is no way to recover them. So you just have to reopen the file. So that's why I saved before I start the process here. It's being rarer and rarer for that to happen. So I really doubt it's gonna happen here at all, but just in case, right? We're trying to be careful. So I saved my scene, and I'm gonna go to multi-map exporter. I'm not gonna export any texture right now. I'm gonna make sure I have 8192, which is not here in the presets, right? You have to click and drag all the way to the maximum, that's 8K. Map border increase in there so you can have some more buffer. This is very important. This is the whole point of using that process I just showed you guys, is that you have to use the switch morph target, because it compares the export with the buffer and then exports it, right? And then here, that's the interesting thing. By default, you should export from subdivision level 1, right? The lowest, which is the one we are seeing in the screen right now. But we want to export the displacements from subdivision level 2 and up, because this subdivision level 2 model is the one we are bringing to Maya. And that's going to be the model that we're going to have to calculate the displacement on top of that, since we're going to be rendering that model in Maya. So that's the whole trick in here. So DP subpix at 4, adaptive on, and then mid at 0. Other than that, 32-bit EXR. And just to double check if you guys forgot to do the first time when you're talking about it, under file names here, make sure this one is UDIM. If it's not, keep clicking until you switch to UDIM. And that's it. Now that we have everything set, let's export some maps. And then we're gonna export those maps into the folder called source images, which was created by Maya when we set up the whole, setting the directory, right? Like the scene, how you call it, the project scene for Maya. So the name here is called base mesh LR3 right now, right? You can change it, for example, like if you want another name, you can just rename the subtool itself. You can just do like, for example, face, and I'm just gonna put like an iteration here, which is gonna be number 3. So phase 3. If you do something like that, now if you try to export the maps, you should see phase 3 in there, right? So let's go again, source images, phase 3. Let's see how fast we can get this to export. Remember, we're exporting 3 8K maps, and at the maximum resolution, right? And with everything cranked to the maximum, to the best of the best, DP, subpix, and adaptive. So like the kind of stuff that would cause ZBrush to take hours and hours to export, maps like this. Let's see how long it takes with the HD geometry. So phase 3, let's do it. You should take about, I would say like, I'm gonna guess like between 4 and 6 minutes, maybe less than that, probably like 3 minutes. So this way, I mean, like if you're using the HD geometry, man, I swear, like you can have like 3, 4, 5 iterations a night. You know, it's like do a little tweak, re-export the maps, bring back to Maya. You know, it's like it's super cool. So now that we have everything exporting, let's replace this model here with the real deal, right? So let's just gonna open my Hypershade here. A little sphere, you click there, you open the Hypershade. I'm gonna click my model and I'm gonna say graph materials and selected objects. So now I have, oh, actually it's switched. This is not my model. This is the one I was using for the, just for the test. This is the actual model I have with the skin shader. So just gonna go graph materials. So I have my skin temp in there. We're gonna be using the same. You just plug into the actual model now. So I'm just gonna delete this model and I'm gonna import the mid resolution we exported, right? Remember, not the low res. Let's import the mid res here. So now I have the mid resolution, 69,000 polys. If I wanna check the poly count, you can go to display, heads up in display, and then poly count, right? And then you have 69,000 right there. So a few things you can do. You don't need to, but if it bothers you to see like the facets in here, right? You can just go to your modeling, and then you can go to your mesh display and say soften edge. And now it's all soft, so that's good. And then click the model again, and you're gonna see there's a tab in here called Arnold. It's in the second tab, right there. It's called Arnold. We're gonna set up this model here to render. In this setting, basically we're gonna be doing just this time. If you have your model already finished, right? Like it's the final topology, you should be able to set up this today and forget about it. And then every time we need to bring a new version of the model, we're gonna use like a blend shape, just like to blend between one and the other one. And that's gonna be a huge time saver because we don't need to do this whole process I'm gonna be doing now. And also if there is hair applied and everything, it's gonna conform to the mesh after the blend shape. So check this out. So I have the model selected, click the second tab, went to Arnold. I'm gonna go here, and the first thing I'm gonna set is this one. SSS set name, I'm gonna put like a shared SSS. That's something that I always use for myself. You can use any name you want. I use the shared SSS because I always remember to use it. And if you check, for example, other objects in my scene, every single object you're gonna have to set to the same name. And the reason to do this, if you read Arnold's manual, is that if you don't add all the objects within the same SSS set, it considers that the scatter is different for each one of those objects. So it creates, for example, like between the eye and the skin, it's gonna create a darker line between the two because it's considering that's like two different objects in different subsurface scattering systems, right? But if you have both with the same name, it reads like everything is part of the same subsurface scattering. So the transitions they blend perfectly, you know? So everything looks good. So just make sure you match all the objects, eyeball, everything that has subsurface scattering in the scene, make sure that all the names matching here, okay? So let's go to subdivision now, the second thing we're gonna check. And then subdivision, I'm gonna add Catmull Clark. Iterations, I would not go higher than 4 to start with. So we're gonna start with, maybe let's do 4 here, okay? If it's too much, you can start with 3. And then a couple of other things are gonna change here. From raster, I'm gonna put object. And from pin corner for the UV smoothing, I'm gonna just do linear because I'm not smoothing anything from ZBrush. And that's the best way to prevent any seams to happen. You know, it's like keep everything linear and export everything linear from ZBrush as well, instead of using the smooth when you export. So again, like Catmull Clark, 4, adaptive space object, and then UV smoothing linear. For the displacement attributes, I don't have to change anything here. Basically, like the scalar 0 value is at 0. That's the reason we changed ZBrush to match that, right? So it's 0 as well. And then auto bump here, at this point is off, but I'm gonna turn it on. And so the auto bump is that thing that I told you, for example, like, remember that my model was subdivided a couple of times in non-HD and a bunch of more times in HD. At the end of the day, I have like probably 6 or 7 iterations or subdivisions total, right? but you can tell that I'm only using 4 subdivisions in here. So basically, if that's the case, the way that Arnold sees the maps, if Arnold noticed that there is more detail in the maps than you can accomplish with only 4 iterations, everything that's not it's not able to represent with subdivision levels, it shifts to a kind of like a virtual bump map. So it shifts to bump. So at the end of the day, you get all the details from ZBrush without needing to use all the iterations to represent those details, which is really smart. So it's pretty cool. So at this point here, we are done setting up the object. I'm just gonna go back to my previous skin shader, which is that temp one we just spoke about the other day. And I'm gonna right click and then assign object to viewport, or you can just drag and drop right with the middle click. So now it's assigned. And now what we need to do is actually assign the displacement maps. Let's see if they are done first. Look at that, took 2 minutes and 31 seconds. Granted, my machine is a beast. Yeah, I invested in this machine like months ago. I think the end of last year or something like that. And it's Threadripper 3970X or something like that. And it's pretty fast, man. It's like way faster than my previous machine. But still, even with my old machine, it would not pass like 6 to 8 minutes to export something similar, right? So it should be fast enough in your machine, depending on what it is. But obviously, if you have the fastest machine, the faster you can have, the better to export those things. So let's see if my UVs are okay. Let's just double check. So it seems like they are okay, right? So we have everything we need. And then let's just assign the displacement maps here. So just like I said, we already set up everything here. The displacement maps should be ready to go. So let's just plug it. So I'm gonna just go to my skin shader in here, and I go to graph input and output just to clear it up a little bit. And then there is this node right here, which is the top node. It's like right above the shader itself. That's this little blue box, right? You can either access this like the displacement shader from here, right? Or click this guy here and then click this little box to go back one level, and then you are basically right here. So the best way is just click this one, is the same spot. So under displacement material right here, I'm gonna go to File. Then I'm gonna see displacement in there. I'm gonna just click it again. And then I'm gonna do that trick I did for the other maps that I showed you guys the other time. Instead of quadratic, I'm gonna switch to off because I don't want any blur to happen like in my textures or anything. I just want like completely raw. And then under Arnold, I'm gonna switch off the auto-generate TX textures. Unless, like I mentioned, if your machine doesn't have a lot of memory and you need it, then you might have to do that. But I normally don't use it. And then as you can tell here, ACES 2065 is present in there. But because we did that whole thing about the configuring Maya to auto assign the color space for us, depending on the type of file, let's see what happens here if I plug an EXR, right? So face DM, displacement map, and just open. You can click any of them, right? It's a family here. They all Mari naming convention. So I'm gonna click, like, you can click any of them. I'm gonna get number 3, for example. So you see, like, you open just one file in there, right? But that's not what I want. I want all the files. I have like multiple UDIMs. So you cannot forget to click the UV tile here and switch to Mari, which is UDIM, right? If you did it right, you're gonna see here the number of tiles that you found. So he found 3. So that means we got the 3 files in here. And it switched here, like the DM, it added an automatic tag in here. And it flipped like from 1003, now it's just UDIM. So that means like if I had like 50, 100, 200 files in there, you would find all of them just by using this tag UDIM in here. It would read the numbers automatically. And look how cool, we already assigned the utility linear sRGB in here. In the case of displacement maps, it could be raw in here. It would work the same way. So if you had, like, for example, instead of that, you would have selected utility raw, it would work the same way. But, sRGB works for both like the EXR displacement and also for the HDRIs. So I just keep it that way. And now that we have that assigned, we can do a little render test. And sometimes we don't get it right the first time, and then we have to actually do a couple of tweaks to get it to show a little bit better. But let's see what happens in here. So let's see. This is not my actual. This is actually just the render test I did overnight last Saturday, which is like using that render sequence, right? So this is like the Maya render view, but I'm more interested in this one here, which is the Arnold render view, right? So let's try to render this one. So it takes a little bit longer now because now he has to read all those files, like all those textures into memory. And then he has to subdivide the mesh and then displace everything, right? So it takes longer, obviously. So now it's already coming there. So let's do like a close-up shot in here. Let's see if we can catch some light. If I need to crank the specular for us to see something, that's what I'm gonna do. Let's try here. And let's do it bigger as well, like that. Let's try it in a small area as well. Let's try something like that. And then, like I said, I mean, like it's very faint right now. So let's make sure you're able to see what's going on there. Let's just tweak this shader to have more spec to it. So let's go to last one here, skin temp. And then let's just, so my roughness for the specular is 600. I'm gonna make it shinier. Let's do like 200 only. Let's see if that helps to show something. And then also the color of the skin, it's very, very pale right now. I can actually bring it, make it a little darker so you can actually see it. It's gonna read a little bit. Obviously, I'm gonna have to find like a glancing angle in there that you can see better. Let's try an angle like this, maybe in this corner right here. Let's see closer. And I mean, it's gonna be very dependent of the type of light you have. Like if you have like large soft boxes, like I do, not in this case because this case is an HDRI. But I mean, like if you have like large soft boxes and you're not going to be able to see a lot, and if you have like some kind of map like this one here, which has like a very, very broad kind of like light, you're not going to be able to see much either. But what we can do, we can help a little bit further by tweaking the color of the skin. Let's get, oh, I added some color, this guy here, I'm going to break it. There you go. Okay, now I'm seeing it. I had some bump assigned in there for some reason. Let's see, let's just to make sure that everything is rendering correctly. When you break stuff like that, I just removed something while it was rendering. Sometimes it breaks things. So the best thing is to just make sure everything is refreshed. Just click like update full scene. So I should reload the maps and then recalculate. Because sometimes, you know, it's like if you're turning on and off some lights, it kind of gets confused and all of a sudden it stops like producing shadows, and then you start like noticing that things are not looking quite the way it should be, and then it's because you need to refresh the scene itself. But you can tell that the pores are actually in place now. I'm just gonna make a little bit darker the skin surface and then some surface color right here. See, it's not refreshing at all, huh? Let's try with this one. Try with play. Oh, okay, there you go. Now we're gonna be able to see something. Let's see if we go in an area like that again. Yeah, gonna be able to see now. Let's just leave it refreshing in there and render a little bit further. So at this point here, what we are seeing is just plain pores, right? Like there is nothing more interesting. There is no micro breakup in between. And the shader network is just like as simple as you can get. It's basically like what I was talking last week, right? Like a super simple shader network, which is not gonna be the shader network you're gonna have at the end of the project. That one is gonna be the one that I share. That's basically like my go-to one. But every single new class, I try different things with it. I try to improve it a little bit, you know. So we might get into a point that we're going to be experimenting with it a lot. Yeah, this is just like a test to show how things are looking, right? They look a little bit too broad around here. See, like there's a lot of space between them. So they look all right around here. This area, the muzzles looks good. But this area, I'm probably going to have to add some in-betweens in there, like break up, add some more pores in between. And again, you know, it's like if he's a little kid with a very, you know, little kids don't have a lot of pores visible like that, right? And if he has like a very like early aging skin, an older person, like I was mentioned before, is not going to have very visible pores as well. So what I'm going to have to do here is that after I show you guys how this works, I'm probably going to have to customize for my own character, and I'm going to have to remove a lot of the detail. You know, it's like just really smooth out things pretty good. Now, one thing you can do as a trick here is you can do the opposite, for example, right? So if you have something like, all right, it's rendering in the background, so it's going to be a little slow. Let me just stop it for a second. So you see that it's working, so our proof of concept is okay. So let's just stop it for now. I'm just going to store it. So now we have that as a reference in there. So here is ZBrush. Now we can do the opposite. Let's say now we're going to go to another session of HD, right? So we're going to go HD around here. And now we can do the opposite. So for example, I can save the morph target with all the detail I have in place, like that, store morph target. And then I can just go with smooth stronger, right? That one you can find under smooth, under lightbox, brush, and smooth stronger. Just replace your current smooth with that one. And then if I crank this one all the way, I can actually smooth this quite a lot and remove most of the detail. To go even faster than that, go one subdivision level lower than that, start smoothing around there, right? And then go back up again, and then smooth it again. So you can get like in 2 passes, get all the detail in place, right? So I did the opposite. I start with the detail and I remove the detail, right? Now what you can do, you just go back to your morph brush. And with the morph brush, you can recover whatever you did before, right? So that way you have a lot of flexibility to, you know, it's like, for example, in this case here, if I wanted the intensity to be much lower like this, I have the option to do that, right? And really recover just enough. So yeah, a little trick like that might help you guys. So instead of like relying on the layers that unfortunately we don't have access to, at least we can do those things, you know, it's like those little tricks in there just to help us to, you know, either like starting fresh without any detail, or starting with the detail, then smoothing everything, and then using the morph brush to bring the detail back. So yeah, that's basically what I had for today. And then I think it's a good starting point for you guys, and there's a lot to think about. But I would say like really start by measuring those pores, you know, like what's the density for them. And before going too crazy with like adding a ton of stuff, just like try to share, you know, it's like I'm pretty sure more people can chime in and say like, oh, you know, I don't think it's, the size is okay. I think you can make a little bit broader than what you have, you know. And because like it's a lot of time to be spent, you know, it's like to get everything with the wrong proportion, you know, and then obviously like there's always like a way to erase things and redo, but I mean, it's a pain. If you can get like right from the get-go, it would be great. Awesome, guys. Thank you so much. And I see you tomorrow, same time. And then let's get this to the next level. By tomorrow, I should have my face, like this face, completely covered with the pores. So I'm going to keep going with the same thing. You know, it's like using the erase as much as I can, all the way to the forehead. And I'm not going to be caring too much about the neck at this point. I'm just going to cover this mask. So basically like face all the way to the let me just switch this, otherwise it's going to give me trouble. But basically like this area here are gonna be covering, something like this. Not even the ears, but something like that. That's gonna be the mask, right? So if I can cover this whole thing for tomorrow, I'm happy. If I can't, then I can just like go to the next level around the areas we have built, and the rest I can do the next day, you know. But hopefully I'm gonna have everything in place. I cannot fall behind the schedule either. So awesome. Thank you guys. See you soon.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you, Chris.
You too.
Thank you, Chris.
Just-
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Thanks. Right.